He ruled Seoul's criminal underworld with an iron fist and had never once lost control. Until a rainy Tuesday night when his armored car soaked a quiet woman standing alone in the storm. She didn't scream. She didn't demand anything. She simply looked up. And in that single moment, the most feared man in Korea forgot how to breathe. What happens when a man who has never feared anyone suddenly fears losing someone he barely knows? Stay with me until the very end. If this story moves you, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The rain came down the way it always did in late October. Not politely, not gradually, but all at once, like the sky had made a decision and committed to it without warning. It hit the pavement of Mapogu in cold, heavy sheets that turned puddles into small rivers and sent every sensible person in Seoul scrambling for an awning, a doorway, anything solid overhead. Kang Tae-hyun was not a sensible person. He was, however, a punctual one. The armored Mercedes S-Class rolled through the flooded street at exactly 9:47 p.m., moving faster than the conditions warranted, the engine a low, controlled growl beneath the percussion of rain against reinforced glass. In the back seat, Tae-hyun sat with his jacket collar open, phone pressed hard against his ear, the other hand flat on his knee, a posture his underboss once described as the calm before someone's world ended. "Tell Cho he has 48 hours, Tae-hyun said. His voice was quiet. That was always the warning sign. When he raised his voice, it meant he was managing the situation. When he got quiet, it meant the situation had already been managed, and not in Cho's favor. Tell him I'm not negotiating the port routes again. Tell him I'm offering him an exit. After 48 hours, I stop offering." The man on the other end of the line said something frantic. Tae-hyun didn't respond. He pulled the phone slightly away from his ear, looked out the rain-smeared window at the blurred lights of the Han River Bridge in the distance, and breathed once through his nose. He was 34 years old. He had been running Black Phoenix for 11 years. He had sat across tables from men who had survived prison, war, and every category of betrayal the criminal world offered, and not one of them had made him feel genuinely uncertain in close to a decade. He put the phone back. 48 hours, he repeated. Then he ended the call. His driver, Park Sung-min, said nothing from the front seat. Sung-min had worked for Tae-hyun for 6 years and had learned early that silence after a phone call was a professional courtesy, not a social failure. The car rounded a corner onto a narrower residential road, still moving at pace. And that was when Sung-min saw it. A flooded section of cracked asphalt, deep enough to swallow the front wheel almost to the rim. He had half a second to react. He didn't brake in time. The Mercedes hit the pothole at speed. Water erupted from the impact in a wide, violent arc, a wall of cold, filthy street water that swept sideways and hit the figure standing on the pavement beside the road with the force of something deliberate. Tae-hyun felt the lurch. He looked up. Through the rain-blurred window, he could see a woman. She was standing completely still. She was soaked. Not gradually, not incidentally, but completely and instantaneously, from the crown of her head to the hem of her white blouse, which was now translucent and ruined against her skin. A canvas tote bag hung from her right shoulder, dark with water. Her left hand held the broken strap of a shoe that had apparently lost its battle with the flood. She hadn't moved. She hadn't reacted. She was just standing there. Tae-hyun's hand moved before he consciously decided anything. "Stop the car." Sung-min pulled over without a word. Tae-hyun stepped out into the rain without his umbrella, jacket still open, and crossed the 3 meters of wet pavement between himself and the woman with the controlled stride of someone who did not, as a rule, explain himself to anyone. Up close, she was younger than he'd first estimated. Late 20s, maybe. Brown skin that the cold rain had made luminous rather than diminished. Natural lashes, no visible makeup, or if there had been, it was gone now. She wore the ruined white blouse tucked into dark slacks, both soaked through. The broken shoe was a modest block heel, the kind bought for practicality rather than fashion. She was looking down at the blouse when he reached her. He stopped 2 feet away. "I'm responsible for that." She didn't startle. She looked up, and that was the moment. The one he would replay later in the back seat of the car, and again in his office at midnight, and again at 3 a.m. when he should have been sleeping. because her eyes, when they met his, were completely steady. Dark brown. No fear in them. No anger. No performance of either. Just a person looking at another person. "It's fine," she said. Her Korean was accented. American, he registered, clean and unhurried. Her voice matched her eyes. Nothing in it designed to manage him or diminish herself. He was already reaching for his phone. "I'll replace everything. The blouse, the shoes." "No." Simple. Not rude. Just no. He looked up from the phone. "The clothes are ruined." "I know." She looked back down at the blouse, touched the wet fabric once with 2 fingers, then let it go. "It's fine." "It is not fine." He didn't say it harshly. He said it the way he said most things, with the flatness of a man who dealt in facts rather than feelings, and who found the distance between those two categories professionally useful. "My driver didn't see the water. I should have told him to slow down." She shifted the wet tote bag on her shoulder, adjusted the broken shoe in her hand. "You should probably get back in your car," she said. "You're getting wet." Taehyun looked down at himself. She was right. His shirt was soaked across the shoulders. He hadn't noticed. "Where are you going?" he asked. A pause. "Bus stop, 2 blocks." "In the rain, with a broken shoe." She looked at the shoe in her hand. "It broke 30 seconds ago. I'll manage." Something about the way she said it, not with bravado, not with self-pity, but with the mild pragmatism of someone who had been managing since before managing was a choice, made him stop reaching for his phone. He looked at her directly. "I'll drive you." "No, thank you." "It's the least—" "I said no." She met his gaze when she said it, not aggressively, just clearly. He was quiet for a moment. The rain came down between them. "At least let me replace the clothes," he said. "I can send something to wherever—" "Where do you work?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. It was not the question he had expected. "I'm sorry?" "If you want to make it right." She tilted her head slightly. "Where do you work? Maybe I can return the favor someday." It was a deflection. He understood that immediately. She was redirecting the conversation away from receiving anything from him, rebalancing the exchange so it wasn't charity. He registered the move, respected it involuntarily. "Phoenix Global Holdings," he said. "Tower 1, Yeongdeungpo." She was still for exactly 1 second. Then, "I work there." He looked at her. "Corporate intelligence, 2nd floor." She said it without emphasis, as though it were the most unremarkable thing in the world. "I've been there 2 years and 4 months." Kang Tae-hyun, who personally reviewed every executive division of his multinational corporation, who knew the P&L of every subsidiary, who had signed the contract that built the Yeongdeungpo Tower down to the square footage, stood on a wet street in Mapogu and had absolutely nothing to say. He ran Phoenix Global Holdings. He owned it. He had built it from a financial front operation into a genuine multinational enterprise with 840 employees across 6 countries. He reviewed department rosters. He signed hiring approvals. He had personally restructured the corporate intelligence division 14 months ago. He had never noticed her. The silence lasted long enough that she apparently took it as dismissal. She shifted the broken shoe to her other hand, pulled the wet tote bag strap higher on her shoulder, and turned toward the direction of the bus stop. "Wait," he said. She stopped. Didn't turn around. "Tomorrow evening." He heard himself say it before he had fully decided to. "After business hours. Come up to the executive floor." A pause. "Why?" she asked, still not looking at him. "Because I've apparently failed to notice someone who works in my own company for over 2 years, he said, "and I'd like to understand how that's possible." She turned then, looked at him again. That same steady gaze, water running down her face, the ruined blouse dark against her collarbone. "You're serious," she said. "I don't do anything else." Another pause. She looked at him the way someone looks at a door they're not sure they should open. Not frightened of what's behind it, but aware that opening it means something. 7 o'clock, she said finally. Then she walked into the rain. Taehyun stood on the wet pavement until she disappeared around the corner. Then he walked back to the Mercedes, got in, and sat in silence while Sungmin waited with professional patience for a direction. "The office," Taehyun said, Sungmin pulled out. Neither of them spoke. Taehyun sat with his wet shirt cold against his back and looked out the window at the passing lights of Seoul and the question that had already lodged itself somewhere behind his sternum, quiet but persistent, like a signal from a frequency he hadn't known his radio could receive, repeated itself without invitation. How does someone disappear inside their own world? He arrived at Phoenix Tower at 10:15. The executive floor was empty except for his personal security detail and his assistant, who had learned years ago not to express surprise at late arrivals. Taehyun went directly to his office, poured a single glass of water he didn't drink, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Han River. He pulled up the Corporate Intelligence Department file on his tablet, employee roster, 41 names. He scrolled through them with the systematic attention he applied to everything, and there, at position 27 in the alphabetical order, was a name that his eyes had presumably passed over on at least 6 separate reviews without snagging on it. Bennett, Zuri A., Data Analyst, Corporate Intelligence. Hire. Date, 26 months ago. Performance reviews consistently rated in the top quartile of her department. No disciplinary records, no complaints filed, no commendations either. Though the notes section from her last 2 reviews both contained the same phrase from 2 different supervisors. Works independently, minimal integration with team culture. He read that twice. Minimal integration with team culture. He looked at the window, at the rain still coming down over Seoul, blurring the bridge lights into soft, disconnected halos. He put the tablet down, picked it up again, looked at the performance rating, top quartile, consistent, 2.5 years, and thought about what it meant that someone that capable had been sitting 40 floors below him for over 2 years without a single person bringing her name to his attention. He thought about her voice, the way she'd said it's fine with the absolute absence of self-pity. He thought about the shoe in her hand. He went home at midnight and did not sleep well, which was unusual. Kang Tae-hyun slept well. He had trained himself to sleep well the same way he had trained himself to do everything else, through discipline, through the deliberate management of what he allowed himself to feel at any given hour. Feeling things on a schedule was a survival strategy. Feeling them off schedule was how men in his profession made expensive mistakes. He lay in the dark of his apartment on the 42nd floor of a building he owned and stared at the ceiling and listened to the rain and thought about a woman with steady eyes who had refused every offer he made her. He was at the office by 6:30 the next morning. He reviewed 3 contract amendments, approved a restructuring proposal for the Manila office, and handled a situation with a business rival in Busan that required the kind of conversation that never appears in corporate minutes. By noon, he had done a full day's work by any reasonable standard. By 3 o'clock, he was standing outside the glass partition of the corporate intelligence floor. He told himself he was doing a security review. The department was responsible for sensitive competitive analysis, financial modeling, market intelligence, due diligence. A security review was entirely reasonable. He had in fact done one 14 months ago. He stood at the partition for 11 minutes. Through the glass he could see her. She sat at the 3rd desk from the left window, facing away from the door. Her hair was in tight, neat braids pulled back from her face. She wore a plain gray cardigan over a collared shirt, glasses he hadn't seen in the rain, large, dark-framed, slightly too big for her face. The desk around her was precise. 2 monitors, 1 open notebook, a coffee cup pushed to the far edge. Nothing decorative, no photographs, no personal objects. She was working on something that clearly required complete concentration. Her body was still, both hands moving between keyboard and trackpad with the quick economic movements of someone who had done this long enough that it required no conscious thought. 2 colleagues on her left were talking across desks in low voices. She didn't look up. She brought her left hand up and rubbed the back of her neck once. Went back to the keyboard. A 3rd colleague approached her desk, leaned over, said something. Zuri looked up, listened, nodded, said something brief, then turned back to her screen. The colleague walked away with what appeared to be a printed document from Zuri's desk. Zuri watched them go for a half-second, then turned back to her screen without expression. Taehyun was still watching when one of the department supervisors spotted him through the glass and appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone who had just realized they might have unknowingly committed a firing offense. "Chairman Kang." The supervisor's voice was 3 registers too high. I didn't know you were scheduled for a... I'm not, Taehyun said. Continue your work. He went back upstairs. He sat at his desk for 40 minutes, doing very little. At 5:45, he told his assistant to cancel his 6 o'clock call. At 6:58, he heard a knock at his office door. She was punctual too, apparently. She came in the way she moved in everything he had observed so far. Without announcement, without theater, without any apparent awareness of the fact that she was walking into the private office of the man who had built the building around her. She was wearing the same plain clothes from the department floor, the oversized glasses, flat shoes. She stopped about 4 feet inside the door and waited. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. She sat down. The silence lasted exactly 1 second longer than was comfortable, and it was Taehyun who broke it, which was, in his experience, extremely rare. You dressed differently last night, he said. She looked at him without flinching. Yes. The blouse, the heels. Yes. That wasn't... He stopped. Chose words with the care of someone who had learned that imprecise language caused problems. That wasn't how you usually present. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked at them briefly, then back up. No. He waited. She exhaled. A small sound, the sound of someone deciding something. I had a blind date, she said. He was supposed to meet me at the cafe on Mapo Daero at 8:30, the one with the blue awning. He didn't show. He didn't show. Flat. No drama in it. So I left. And then your car hit the puddle. Taehyun was quiet. The clothes weren't mine, she said. I borrowed a wig. I watched makeup tutorials for a week. I bought clothes I don't normally buy. She said it with the precision of someone giving a report, which he suspected was a habit rather than a choice. I thought if I looked different, maybe... She stopped, adjusted her glasses. It doesn't matter. It does, he said. She looked at him. That steady gaze again. Why does it matter to you? It was a fair question. He didn't have a clean answer. He had several answers, none of which he was accustomed to saying out loud to anyone, let alone an employee he had known for approximately 18 hours. You've been in my company for over 2 years, he said instead. You're rated in the top quartile of your department. Both your performance reviewers noted you work independently. He paused. That's a management euphemism. She almost smiled, not quite. I know what it is. What does it mean, in your case? She was quiet for a moment. It means I do the work that nobody else wants to do and nobody asks how I'm managing it, and that arrangement seems to suit everyone involved. He looked at her. Does it suit you? The almost smile disappeared. No one ever notices me, she said. And it was the plainest, most undefended sentence he had ever heard anyone speak inside this office. No performance in it. No bid for sympathy. Just a fact she had apparently made peace with long enough ago that saying it no longer caused visible pain. Not in the department, not before. I've learned to work around it. Taehyun sat with that sentence in the room between them. His phone buzzed twice on the desk. He didn't look at it. I noticed you, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. You noticed me because your car ruined my clothes. I noticed you because of the way you looked at me when I came over to apologize. He said it directly, without softening it. You weren't afraid. You weren't performing. You just looked at me, like I was a person. Something shifted in her face. Very small, very controlled. People usually look at me differently, he said. I know who you are, she said. Everyone in the company knows who you are. And yet, she said quietly. The rain had started again outside. He could hear it against the tower windows. Soft at this height, almost gentle. Nothing like the battering it had given the street the night before. He thought about the shoe in her hand, the way she had turned and walked into the rain without looking back. I'd like to ask you something, he said. She waited. What would it take, he said carefully, for someone like you, someone who has made herself invisible by practice, to stop? The question sat between them for a long time. Zuri Bennett looked at the man across the desk. This man with his cold, precise voice and his controlled hands and the particular stillness of someone who had learned that stillness was its own form of power. and she felt something she was not expecting. Not attraction, not yet, or not only. Recognition. She opened her mouth to answer, and that was when Tae-hyun's office door opened without a knock, and his underboss, Min Jae-seok, walked in with the expression of a man carrying news that could not wait, eyes hard, jaw tight, a single folded paper in his hand. Jae-seok stopped when he saw Zuri, looked at Tae-hyun. Something passed between them in the language of men who have worked together long enough to have entire conversations without speaking. "I'll come back," Jae-seok said. "No." Tae-hyun stood. His voice had shifted. The warmth that had been building in the room over the last hour was gone, replaced instantly by something older and colder. "Miss Bennett," he looked at her. "We'll continue this another time." Zuri stood without argument, picked up her bag, and moved toward the door. She passed Jae-seok without looking at him. At the threshold she paused, and for a moment Tae-hyun thought she was going to say something that would stay with him. She did. "The answer," she said quietly, not turning around, "is someone who actually asks the question." Then she was gone. Jae-seok watched the empty doorway for a beat, then turned to Tae-hyun. "That's the employee?" he said. Tae-hyun didn't answer. He was already reading the paper Jae-seok had brought, and the warmth was entirely gone now, replaced by the cold, functional alertness of a man who understood that the world he controlled did not pause for personal reckonings. But somewhere beneath the calculation, in a place he hadn't opened in a very long time, something had shifted. He folded the paper. "What's the situation?" he said. Jae-seok told him. And as Tae-hyun listened, processing the crisis with the full practiced machinery of Black Phoenix's leadership, a single question remained lodged beneath everything else. Quiet, persistent, and entirely inconvenient. The answer is someone who actually asked the question. When had he last asked anyone anything that wasn't strategic? When had he last wanted to? The paper Jae-seok had brought was a single printed sheet, a surveillance photograph, grainy from distance, taken somewhere near the Dongjak-daegyo Bridge. Two men. One of them was a mid-level Phoenix distribution manager named Hwang Chul-soo. The other man's face was partially obscured, but the jacket was recognizable. Charcoal gray with a double-breasted cut that belonged to the Yoi faction, a rival organization that Black Phoenix had been holding at arm's length through a fragile, mutually exhausted ceasefire for the better part of 18 months. Tae-hyun looked at the photograph for 6 seconds. Then he set it flat on the desk. "When was this taken?" he said. 4 days ago. Jae-seok's voice was tight. He was a broad man, thick through the shoulders, with a face that hadn't looked young in a decade. Not from age, but from accumulated knowledge of the kind that doesn't make a person look wise so much as permanently braced. He had been with Tae-hyun since the beginning. He was the only person in Black Phoenix who could walk into this office without knocking, and he exercised that privilege rarely enough that when he did, it meant something. "My guy at the bridge didn't recognize the Yoi contact until yesterday. Took time to confirm. Does Hwang know we have this?" "No." "Where is he now?" "Yongsan, his apartment. We've had 2 men on him since this morning." Tae-hyun stood at the window with his back to the room. The rain on the glass was steady, patient, indifferent to every human problem occurring 40 floors below it. He breathed once through his nose, out through his mouth. The cold, functional part of him, the part that had been running Black Phoenix since he was 23 years old, was already calculating. Hwang Chul-soo had access to 3 distribution routes and 1 offshore account structure. If the Yoi faction had approached him 4 days ago, they had potentially had 4 days of access to information that should never have left this organization. The warmer part of him, the part that had just spent an hour in a conversation that felt like something he couldn't name yet, was still processing the sound of Zuri Bennett's voice saying the answer is someone who actually asks the question. He pushed that down, filed it in a place he would return to later, when the night had room for it. "Bring him in tomorrow morning," Tae-hyun said. "Not tonight. Tonight I want him watched. I want to know if he makes any calls, any movements, any contact. I want to know what he eats for dinner." Jae-seok nodded. "And the Yoi side?" "Leave them alone until we know what Hwang gave them." He turned from the window. If he gave them nothing actionable, we handle it quietly. If he gave them the Inchenroding, he stopped. Then we have a different conversation. Jae-seok looked at him with the measured expression of a man who had watched Tae-hyun make decisions for 11 years and had learned to read the difference between controlled anger and something worse. You want me in tomorrow morning? 6 a.m. Right. Tae-seok picked up the photograph from the desk, tucked it inside his jacket. He was halfway to the door when he stopped. Didn't turn around immediately. The woman, he said. Bennett. Tae-hyun said nothing. I'm not asking about the personal side of it, Jae-seok said, still not turning. I'm asking because she works in corporate intelligence, and if there is a leak in this organization, she's not the leak. You've known her for 20 hours. I've known Hwang Chul-soo for 4 years. Tae-hyun's voice was flat. Your point doesn't hold. Jae-seok turned then, looked at him directly. My point is that you're looking at this woman in a way I haven't seen you look at anything in a long time, and that's a vulnerability. And in our line of work, vulnerabilities get people killed. He said it without apology, without softening it, the way he said everything that mattered. I'm not saying she's anything. I'm saying be careful what doors you open when you can't see what's on the other side. The silence between them was the particular silence of two men who respected each other enough to be honest and knew each other well enough to know when honesty had reached its limit. Good night, Jae-seok, Tae-hyun said. Jae-seok left. Tae-hyun stood alone in his office for another 20 minutes. He did not look at his phone. He did not review any more files. He stood at the window and looked at Seoul in the rain and thought about two things simultaneously, which was something he rarely permitted himself: the photograph of Hwang Chul-soo and the way Zuri Bennett had paused at the door before she spoke. Not two separate problems, two separate waits. He went home at 11. He slept 4 hours. He was back in the office before anyone else arrived. The Hwang situation resolved itself in the most exhausting way possible, which was inconclusively. Hwang came in at 9 a.m. with the bewildered, slightly sweating energy of a man who doesn't know specifically what he's being called in for, but knows, on some animal level, that it is not good. Tae-hyun let Jae-seok run the conversation. He sat at the far end of the conference table and watched. Hwang denied everything for 40 minutes. Then he admitted to 1 meeting. Then he admitted to 2. Then he cried, which Tae-hyun had not been expecting and which didn't move him. And then Hwang admitted that he had passed the UE contact a general overview of the Incheon routing structure. Not the specific account numbers, not the contact names, but the basic architecture. Enough to be useful, not enough to be catastrophic. By noon, Hwang had been removed from his position, stripped of his access, and sent home with the understanding, communicated quietly and without theatrics by Jae-seok, that his continued health depended on his continued silence. A cleanup team was already restructuring the Incheon routes. It was an expensive morning. Not devastating, just expensive. Tae-hyun ate lunch at his desk and read quarterly projections for the Osaka subsidiary and thought about none of it. He thought about the corporate intelligence floor, about the third desk from the left window. At 2:15, he invented a reason. He called his head of security, Park Dong-hyun, and told him he wanted a walkthrough of the Yongdong-po Tower's lower floor access protocols, a review of the badge reader system, and the emergency stairwell security. Dong-hyun, to his credit, did not point out that this review had been completed 3 months ago. He simply confirmed the 2:30 time. Tae-hyun walked the lower floors with Dong-hyun for 20 minutes, pointed at things, asked questions with the appearance of focused attention, and then took the long route back to the executive elevator, the route that passed the glass partition of corporate intelligence. She was at her desk. Same position as yesterday. One monitor showing a dense financial model, the other displaying what appeared to be a satellite mapping interface. Left hand on the keyboard, right hand turning a pen slowly between her fingers, a small, unconscious movement, the kind people make when they're thinking hard without knowing they're thinking. A colleague approached her desk and dropped a thick stack of printed reports in front of her without speaking, then walked away. Zuri looked at the stack, looked at her own screen, looked at the stack again. She picked it up, set it to her left, and went back to the keyboard. No reaction, no expression. Tae-hyun watched that exchange for exactly as long as it took to happen and felt something unclean move through his chest. He went back upstairs. By 3:30, he had made a decision that was, By any professional standard he held himself to, completely irrational. He pulled up the employee scheduling system, not something the chairman of a multinational corporation would normally access directly, which was why his assistant gave him a carefully neutral look when he asked for the department coffee delivery roster. The corporate intelligence floor, he said. Who handles the morning coffee order? His assistant, a composed young man named Song, who had worked for him for 3 years, blinked once. Usually the junior analysts rotate. Starting Monday, send the order directly from the executive kitchen. Tell them it's a new protocol for senior departments. He paused. Have someone bring it to the department at 9 a.m. Not a runner. Have me informed when it's going down. Song looked at his tablet, looked at Tae-hyun. Yes, Chairman. That's all. Song left. Tae-hyun leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling and acknowledged, privately and without illusions, that he had just engineered a reason to walk 40 floors down with a tray of coffee at 9 in the morning like a man who had completely lost perspective on his own dignity. He did it anyway. Monday at 9:02, he walked onto the corporate intelligence floor carrying 2 cups of coffee from the executive kitchen. The rest had been sent with an assistant, but he had taken 2, which was a decision he hadn't consciously made until he was already on the elevator, and stopped at the 3rd desk from the left window. Zuri looked up. She looked at the coffee, at him, at the coffee again. Security review? She said. Coffee review, he said. She stared at him for a moment with an expression that was trying very hard not to be amused and was losing the battle by small degrees. You're the chairman of this company. I'm aware. And you brought coffee to my desk. To the department, he said. You happen to be in the department. She took the cup he was holding out toward her. Her fingers brushed his briefly. An accident of geometry, nothing more. And she pulled back a half inch with the instinct of someone who had learned that contact was something to be careful about. He noticed. He said nothing. Did you need something? She asked. Her voice was careful, professional. But the almost smile was back, contained behind the careful voice like light under a door. I wanted to ask you something, he said. The colleague at the desk to her left had stopped pretending to type. Here, she said, with the smallest possible movement of her eyes toward the colleague. Tae-hyun looked at the colleague. The colleague suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. Tonight, Tae-hyun said. 7 o'clock. She looked at him steadily. You keep asking me to come to your office. Not my office, he said. There's a restaurant on the 5th floor, private dining room. No one will be there at 7. She held the coffee cup in both hands. Why? Because the last conversation we had was interrupted, he said, and I don't like leaving things unfinished. A pause. She looked at the coffee. Something moved across her face that she controlled before it became readable. All right, she said. 7 o'clock. He nodded, turned, walked back toward the elevator. Behind him, from the desk to her left, he heard a low whisper. A colleague's voice, female, quiet but not quiet enough. Did the chairman just bring you coffee? And Zuri's reply, flat and dry. Apparently. He allowed himself exactly 1 second of something that felt embarrassingly close to satisfaction before the elevator doors closed. The restaurant was empty at 7, as promised. The kitchen had left a simple setup: tea, water, 2 plates of food that would stay warm. Tae-hyun arrived first and sat facing the door. She was 3 minutes late, which he suspected meant she had almost not come. She sat across from him and put her bag on the chair beside her and folded her hands on the table with the composure of someone who had decided, in the elevator, that composure was the only armor that would serve her here. You watched me, she said before he could speak. Through the partition, you've done it at least twice. He looked at her. Yes. Why? I was trying to understand something. What? You. He said it plainly. How you work, how you move, how you... He stopped. You help everyone who comes to your desk. The stack they dropped on you this morning, that wasn't your assignment. She was very still. You saw that. Yes. And I wanted to know why you do it. She exhaled. Small sound, same sound as Friday night, the sound of someone deciding something. Because it's easier than explaining why I won't, she said. And because when you don't have anything else, no recognition, no particular status, No reason for anyone to pay attention to you? Sometimes you hold on to being useful like it's the only solid thing. The restaurant was very quiet. That's not a sustainable arrangement, he said. I know that, she said, and there was a thread of something sharp in it. Not anger at him, but the sharp edge of a truth she had known for a long time and resented having reflected back. I know it. That doesn't make it easy to change. He poured tea for her without asking, set the cup in front of her. She looked at it like she wasn't sure what to do with the gesture. Tell me about before Phoenix, he said. She wrapped both hands around the cup. That's a long before. We have time. She looked at him, looked at the tea. Something in her settled. Not relaxed, but settled. The way a person settles when they've decided to trust a surface that might or might not hold their weight. And she talked. She didn't tell it as a story. She told it the way people tell things they've never organized into narrative form because they've never had reason to, in fragments, in the order they surfaced, without the editorial smoothing of something rehearsed. Foster care, starting at 7. A family in Incheon. Her mother had come to Korea for work, had gotten sick, and the rest of it happened the way those things happen, without anyone's permission and without adequate explanation to a 7-year-old. A foster family who had a biological daughter. Not cruel people. Not kind ones either. The distinction she drew was careful. They weren't the villains of the story. They just didn't see her. The biological daughter had new clothes for school. Zuri had the clothes that didn't fit the biological daughter anymore. The biological daughter had birthday parties with friends. Zuri had a cupcake on the kitchen counter with a candle her foster mother forgot to light. She said all of this without crying, without editorializing, like a woman reading from a document she had memorized so thoroughly it no longer had the power to surprise her. Taehyun listened to all of it without speaking. When she stopped, the silence between them was different from the one at the beginning, denser, more inhabited. The blind date, he said quietly. How many times have you tried? She looked at her tea. Enough times to start borrowing wigs. He felt something move in his chest that he did not have a clean word for, and that he was not, if he was honest, accustomed to feeling. Anger was the closest approximation. Not at her, not at anything she'd done, but at the specific, unremarkable cruelty of a world that had looked at this woman for 30 years and kept looking past her. The low-grade, casual variety of cruelty, the kind that never thinks of itself as cruelty at all. The version of you I met in the rain, he said. The wig, the clothes. Yes. That's not the version sitting here. No. She met his eyes. This version doesn't usually get invited anywhere. She does now, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her processing it, not the words, but the weight behind them, the question of whether they meant what they sounded like, or whether they were the polished courtesy of a man who was accustomed to making people feel temporarily significant. He didn't look away. He let her read whatever she needed to read. Whatever she found, it made her exhale. Why are you doing this? She asked, not accusatory, genuinely asking. Because you looked at me on a wet street like I was a person, he said. Do you understand how rarely that happens? She blinked. You're the most powerful person in this building. Yes, he said, and you're the first person in a long time who didn't seem to care about that at all. She was quiet for a moment, then very quietly. I cared. I just didn't show it. What were you feeling? She looked at the table. Scared, she said. And us, something else. I haven't figured out the name for it yet. He thought, neither have I. He didn't say it. They ate dinner in the quiet of the empty restaurant, and the conversation moved, not away from the heavy things, but alongside them, as people do when they've established that neither party is going to pretend the heavy things don't exist. He talked about Phoenix, the legitimate side, the restructuring, the Manila office headaches. She talked about the financial modeling she'd been working on, a market entry analysis for the Southeast Asian division that she'd apparently been refining for 6 weeks without anyone asking for it. He paused when she said that. No one assigned that to you? No. She looked at her plate. I saw a gap in the existing analysis. I started working on it. Send it to me. She looked up. Tomorrow morning. Send it directly to my office email. He He said it the way he said things that were already decided. Don't send it through your supervisor. She searched his face. You haven't read it. No, he agreed. But you've been doing it for 6 weeks on your own time, and you're in the top quartile of your department, and you spotted a gap that nobody with an assigned brief spotted. He looked at her steadily. I'll read it. Something shifted in her face. Not the almost smile this time. Something quieter and more difficult. The expression of someone receiving something they wanted badly enough that the receiving of it was almost painful. Okay, she said. They walked out of the restaurant at 9:15. The elevator lobby was empty. She pressed the down button and they waited, and the small, ordinary domesticity of standing, waiting for an elevator together after dinner, felt to Tae-hyun like something he hadn't experienced in so long that he'd forgotten it had a texture. The elevator came. She stepped in. He held the door. Zuri, he said. She looked at him. The colleague who dropped that report stack on your desk this morning. He said it evenly. What's her name? She went still. Why? Professional interest. Lee Soo-yeon, she said carefully. But she's... Good night, he said. The doors closed. He stood in the empty elevator lobby and breathed for a moment, then pulled out his phone and sent a message to Song. Pull the assignment records for corporate intelligence for the last 6 months. Flag anything where an analyst's completed work was submitted or credited under a different name. Full report on my desk by 8 a.m. He put the phone away. He took the stairs back to the executive floor, which he hadn't done in months, because he needed the movement, needed something physical to metabolize what was happening in his chest, not in the controlled, manageable way he had processed everything for the past 11 years, but in the way of something that had gotten past the gate before the gate knew to close. The report Song produced the next morning at 8:03 was 11 pages long. Tae-hyun read all of it before 8:30. Lee Soo-yeon, 28, 3 years in the department. By the record, a competent mid-level analyst. By the record, 4 separate instances over the past 14 months where completed analytical work had been submitted under her name or her team's attribution that when traced to original drafts in the system led back to the same source. Bennett, Zuri A. 4 instances, 14 months. Tae-hyun set the report down. He picked up his coffee. He put it down without drinking. Jae-suk came in at 8:45 for the morning operations briefing, saw Tae-hyun's face, and sat down without saying hello. Yaoi's situation is stable, Jae-suk said. The Incheon restructure is complete. Cho in Busan has confirmed the truce extension. Good. Tae-hyun didn't move. His hands were flat on the desk. Before we start, I need you to look at something. He slid the 11-page report across the desk. Jae-suk read the relevant sections, looked up. His expression was carefully neutral, which meant he was surprised. This is a personnel matter. Yes. You want me to No, Tae-hyun said. I'll handle it myself. He took the report back. Schedule a department-wide meeting in corporate intelligence for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Full staff. Use a routine quarterly review as the pretext. Jae-suk studied him. Tae-hyun. What? 11 years. Jae-suk's voice was measured, deliberate. I've watched you make 1,000 decisions. Military-grade decisions. I've never once second-guessed your judgment in the field. A pause. This woman is making you feel things on a timetable that's too fast. Tae-hyun looked at him. Fast is dangerous, Jae-suk said. In our business, fast is how people die. She's not a strategic risk, Tae-hyun said. She's an employee who has been exploited by her colleagues for over a year while her own company, my company, didn't notice. That's not why you care, Jae-suk said quietly. The silence between them had weight. No, Tae-hyun said finally. It's not the only reason. Jae-suk exhaled, leaned back, rubbed his jaw with one hand, a habit from years ago that surfaced only when he was genuinely uncertain. You know what I'm going to say. You're going to say she's a civilian and I run a criminal organization, and that's a gap that doesn't close. That's what I'm going to say. I know, Tae-hyun said. And I heard you. He picked up his coffee, drank it this time. Schedule the meeting. The department-wide meeting happened the next morning at 9. Taehyun walked in at 9:02, which was 2 minutes later than he normally operated, because he had spent those 2 minutes in the corridor steadying something in himself that he wasn't accustomed to needing to steady. 41 employees, arranged in a conference room normally used for quarterly reviews, with the low-grade corporate anxiety of a room full of people who don't know what the meeting is about, but know it's unusual. Taehyun stood at the front and looked at the room with the calm, measuring gaze that had become his natural resting expression sometime in his late 20s and never really left. He found Zuri in the third row. Oversized glasses, gray cardigan, hands folded on the table, posture collected. She was watching him with an expression that gave away nothing, which he was beginning to understand was not coldness, but armor, the kind built over years, not hours. He looked away before anyone could track the direction of his gaze. He gave a brief, composed address about departmental performance standards, attribution practices, and the company's expectations around intellectual honesty in collaborative work. He used no names. He cited no specific incidents. He spoke for 4 minutes in a voice that was entirely even and entirely unmistakable in its implications. Then he said, "Effective immediately, all analytical submissions in this department will include a drafting history log. Work will be credited to the individual who produced it. Any questions about how this works in practice should go to your department head by end of day." He looked at the room. "That's all," he said. "Thank you for your time." He left. In the corridor outside, he heard, through the closing door, unmistakably, the sound of the room reacting, the specific texture of a group of people exhaling and then immediately beginning to whisper. He kept walking. He was at the elevator when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Lee Soo-yeon was standing 6 feet away, and her face was doing something complicated. Flushed, tight-jawed, eyes bright with the specific anger of someone who has just been called out publicly enough that everyone understood, but not specifically enough that they could prove it. She was 28 years old, and she was, in this moment, looking at the chairman of the company that employed her with an expression that was trying to be controlled and failing at it by small, visible degrees. "Chairman Kang," she said. Her voice was steady, barely. "I'd like to—" "Miss Lee." He said it the way he said things that had already been decided. "I'm aware of what you'd like to say. I'd recommend you spend the rest of the day deciding whether you'd like to continue working at this company." He looked at her directly. "The answer to that question depends on whether you're capable of doing your own work from this point forward." She opened her mouth. He stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. He stood in the elevator going up and breathed through the tight, controlled anger that he had managed to keep entirely out of his face and voice for the last 12 minutes, and thought about 4 instances over 14 months, and a woman who had accepted having her work taken from her the same way she'd accepted everything else, as the price of remaining useful enough to stay. He sent Zuri an email at 10:15 from his desk. Short, direct. "I read 6 weeks of your Southeast Asian analysis last night. Send me everything." She replied at 10:22. "It's not finished." He typed back, "Send it anyway." A pause. Then, "Okay." He closed his laptop and looked out the window at Seoul in the mid-morning light, gray and flat and ordinary, the way the city looked on the days that were just days, without rain or violence or anything cinematic about them, and understood, with the particular clarity that came to him when he had stopped fighting something, that whatever was happening between himself and Zuri Bennett had moved past the point where he could reasonably pretend it was professional curiosity. He could end it, pull back, be the CEO, be the professional, be the man who understood that his world was not one that absorbed civilians without cost. Or he could not. He was still sitting with that choice when Song knocked, came in and said, "Chairman, there's been an incident on the corporate intelligence floor." Taehyun looked up. 3 female analysts, Song said. His voice was carefully flat. "In the break room, approximately 20 minutes ago." He paused. "Miss Bennett was present. The conversation was—" Another pause. The kind that meant Song was choosing words. "I think you should speak to security about the recording." Taehyun stood up. The security recording was 41 seconds long. Taehyun watched it once on the monitor in the security office. Standing behind the desk with his arms at his sides and his face doing nothing at all, which was the expression he wore when he was feeling something that he had no intention of allowing anyone in the room to see. The break room footage was black and white, time-stamped at 9:47 a.m., approximately 12 minutes after the department meeting had ended. 3 women had entered within 90 seconds of each other. The camera angle was overhead and partial, but the audio was clear enough. Song had already confirmed the identities. Lee Soo-yeon, Park Ji-na, Choi Ara. All 3 mid-level analysts, all 3 with between 2 and 4 years in the department. Zuri had come in at 9:49 to refill her water bottle. She hadn't known they were already there. By the time she registered the atmosphere, she was already inside it. The 41 seconds began at the point where Lee Soo-yeon turned around. What followed was not loud. That was the part Taehyun kept returning to as he stood watching the monitor. The complete absence of raised voices. Lee Soo-yeon spoke at normal conversational volume. Park Ji-na laughed. Not cruelly, not theatrically, with the easy, reflexive amusement of someone making a joke in front of people she trusted to find it funny. Choi Ara said something that made the other 2 laugh harder, and then Lee Soo-yeon did an imitation. A walk, exaggerated, flat-footed, shoulders slightly slumped, chin down. That lasted about 4 seconds, and that was accurate enough in its anatomy that Taehyun recognized immediately whose walk was being imitated. Zuri stood at the water dispenser with her back to them during most of it. At the 38-second mark, she turned around. She looked at the 3 of them. Her face in the grainy footage was unreadable, too distant, too low resolution, but her body was completely still, not frozen. Still. The distinction mattered. She walked out. None of the 3 women stopped talking. Taehyun watched the empty doorway for the remaining 3 seconds of footage. Then he straightened up and turned to the security officer at the desk. Send me the full personnel files for Lee Soo-yeon, Park Ji-na, and Choi Ara. Everything. Attendance, performance records, every HR interaction going back to hire date. Yes, Chairman. Now. He walked out of the security office and took the stairs up 2 floors to the executive level and went directly to his desk and sat down, and for approximately 90 seconds, he did nothing at all. He sat with his hands flat on the desk surface and breathed through his nose and looked at the middle distance and let the thing in his chest be what it was without managing it. Then he picked up his phone and called Song. Schedule Lee Soo-yeon, Park Ji-na, and Choi Ara for individual meetings on the executive floor. Tomorrow morning. Back to back. 9 a.m., 9:30, 10. Do not tell them the purpose. A pause. Together or separate? Each one alone. He paused. And Song. Find out where Zuri Bennett is right now. Another pause. Shorter. She's at her desk, Chairman. I checked before coming to you. Of course she was. Of course she had walked out of that break room and gone directly back to her desk and continued working, because that was what she did. That was what she had always done. The work was the solid thing. The work was the only place the math of her existence reliably added up to something. He understood that now in a way that felt different from understanding it 2 days ago. Denser, more physical, the way you understand a thing differently after you've seen it survive something. He sent her an email at 11:10. Are you all right? 3 words. No punctuation at the end because a question mark felt like pressure, and he didn't want to pressure her. She didn't reply for 22 minutes. He watched his inbox with the background attention of a man pretending not to watch his inbox. At 11:32, I'm fine. He looked at those 2 words for a moment, then typed, That's what you said on the street in the rain. A longer pause this time. Then, I know. Then, it was true then too. He set the phone face down on the desk. He went back to work. He was in a call with the Manila office by noon, reviewing the Southeast Asian analysis she had sent him at 10:30. All 6 weeks of it, 114 pages of dense financial modeling and regional market mapping, and the call kept drawing him back to page 47, where she had identified a supply chain vulnerability that his own executive team had missed in their official assessment. She had identified it and then built a 3-scenario response model around it. Unprompted. 6 weeks on her own time for a division she had no assigned responsibility to analyze. He ended the Manila call 20 minutes early. He read to page 90 before Jae-suk knocked and came in at 4 p.m. with the Busan update. Cho confirmed the route adjustment. Jae-suk said, settling into the chair across the desk with the economy of movement of a man who didn't waste energy on unnecessary things. The Yaoi ceasefire is holding. Huang hasn't made any contact with outside parties since we cut his access. He paused. The Incheon situation is cleaner than I expected. Good. Tae-seok looked at him. The particular look, level, assessing, older brother energy contained in the face of a man who had no brothers. You're distracted. I'm reading. You've been on page 90 of that document for 11 minutes. Tae-hyun looked up, closed the document. The department meeting this morning. I heard. Then you heard about the break room. Jae-suk was quiet for a moment. I heard. Song briefed me. He rubbed his jaw. You're calling them in tomorrow? Yes. What are you going to do? What's appropriate? Taehyun said it with the flatness of something decided. One termination. The rest will depend on what they say in the room. Jae-suk nodded slowly, not agreeing exactly, processing. Taehyun, the woman is becoming a pattern. She's not a pattern, she's a person. In our world, people become patterns. That's how we manage risk. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not saying anything against her. I'm saying that every decision you've made in the last 4 days has had her somewhere in the center of it, and that is a change in the way you operate, and changes in the way you operate have consequences we can't always predict in advance. Taehyun looked at him. Are you concerned about the organization or about me? A pause. Both, Jae-seok said honestly. In that order, but both. Taehyun sat with that. He respected Jae-seok's honesty too much to dismiss it, and he knew Jae-seok well enough to know that both was the truest answer the man was capable of giving and probably the most accurate one. I hear you, he said, but I've been running this organization for 11 years on the principle that nothing personal exists, nothing that can be used against you. He looked at the closed document on his desk. I'm starting to wonder what it costs, over time, to live like that. Jae-seok was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. It costs what it costs, he said. We chose this. I chose it at 23, Taehyun said. I'm not sure the man I was at 23 had enough information to make that choice for the man I am now. The silence between them was long and inhabited. Be careful, Jae-seok said finally. It was not a command. It was something closer to a prayer from a man who didn't traffic in prayers. He stood, straightened his jacket, and left. The 3 meetings the following morning were the kind of meetings that Taehyun had learned over 11 years to conduct with a particular economy. He did not raise his voice. He did not editorialize. He stated what he knew, gave the person across the desk one opportunity to respond, and then delivered the outcome. Lee Soo-yeon came in at 9 a.m. with her jaw set and her hands folded on her lap, and the prepared expression of someone who had spent the night constructing a defense. She lasted 4 minutes before the defense collapsed. Not because he pressured it, but because he simply laid the attribution records in front of her and waited, and the records did not leave much room for architecture. He terminated her employment effective immediately. She stood up when he said it. Her face had gone from defensive to something raw. Not grief, not quite, but the close cousin of it, the expression of someone whose version of events has been removed from under them. You're doing this because of her, she said. Her voice was tight and controlled and failing at both. Because she's... I'm doing this, Tae-hyun said quietly. Because you submitted other people's work under your name on 4 separate occasions over 14 months. That's the reason. He looked at her directly. Miss Bennett's relationship to this decision is that she produced the work. That's the extent of it. Lee Soo-yeon left without saying anything else. Park Ji-na at 9:30 was tearful and apologetic in the practiced way of someone who had calculated that contrition was the optimal strategy. He suspended her for 30 days and issued a formal disciplinary record. She thanked him, which he found more uncomfortable than the tears. Choi Ara at 10 was the most honest of the 3, which he respected involuntarily. She came in, sat down, and said, I know why I'm here. I know what I did. Then she looked at her hands. She never said anything, not once. No, Tae-hyun said, she wouldn't. I thought that meant she didn't mind. People who have learned to accept things, he said carefully, are not the same as people who don't mind. He paused. 30-day suspension? Formal record. You have the opportunity to address this directly with Miss Bennett when you return. Or not. That's your choice. But you will not touch her work again. Choyara nodded. She stood up. At the door she paused, and he thought she was going to say something that would complicate things, but she just said, "She's really good. At the work, she's genuinely really good." "I know," Tihan said. After they were gone, he sat in his office for 20 minutes and did nothing, just sat. The morning light came through the tower windows at the angle it reached at 10:15 on a clear day, cutting across the desk in a flat, unambiguous line that divided the surface into light and shadow. He thought about Jae Seok's voice. "Be careful." He thought about Zuri at her desk, the broken shoe in her hand. "It's fine." He thought about page 47 of her analysis. He picked up his phone and called her desk directly, which was not something a chairman called a data analyst's desk directly, and she picked up on the second ring. "Yes?" Professional, slightly wary. "Tonight," he said. "Not the office restaurant, somewhere outside." A pause. "Outside the building?" "Yes." Another pause. Longer. He could hear her breathing, the careful, measured quality of it, the sound of someone deciding. "Where?" He named a place. A small restaurant in Mapogu. Nothing formal. The kind of place that existed without appearing in any corporate entertainment budget. She knew the neighborhood. He could tell from the brief silence that followed. 8:00, she said. 8:00, he confirmed. He put the phone down and looked at the window. He told himself it was dinner. He told himself it was nothing more than that. He was a precise enough thinker to know he was lying to himself, and practiced enough at it to let the lie stand for now. The restaurant in Mapogu was the kind of place that had been there for 20 years and would be there for 20 more. Small, warm-lit, with low tables and menus written on a chalkboard, and a kitchen that produced 3 things exceptionally well and didn't try for a 4th. Taehyun arrived 7 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner with his back to the wall, which was habit rather than paranoia at this point, a reflex so old he no longer noticed it. She arrived at 8 exactly and came in from the rain. It had started again, which was becoming a pattern he had decided not to examine too closely, and spotted him without the hostess's help and crossed the room in the flat-footed, contained walk he now recognized as entirely hers. Not a disguise or a deflection, but simply how she moved through spaces she wasn't sure she belonged in. She sat down. She was wearing the same work clothes but had let her braids down. They fell past her shoulders, and the difference in her face was subtle but real, something slightly less defended about the set of her jaw. "You fired her," she said before he could speak. "Yes." "The others." "Suspended." She looked at the table. "They'll know it was because of me. It was because of the attribution records." Taehyun. It was the first time she had used his name without the title. She said it without appearing to notice she had. "They'll know." "Yes," he said. "They will." She looked at him. "That makes things harder for me. In the department." "I know. And you did it anyway." "What happened was not acceptable," he said, "regardless of what it makes harder." She held his gaze. Something moved in her face that she didn't rush to control. "Do you understand," she said carefully, "that no one has ever done that before? In any job I've had, no one has ever looked at what was happening to me and decided it wasn't acceptable." He didn't say anything. He let it sit. "I don't know what to do with that," she said. Quiet. Honest in the way she was honest, without theater, without bid for effect. "You don't have to do anything with it," he said. "It was simply the right thing." She looked at the menu on the table that she wasn't reading. "You know what I keep thinking about." "What?" "You run this company. I know what you run. Everyone in that building knows there's a version of you that isn't the CEO." She said it carefully, watching his face as she said it. "And I keep thinking that I should be more afraid of that than I am." Taehyun was very still. "Why aren't you?" he said. She thought about it genuinely, which he appreciated. "Because the man who brought coffee to my desk is the same man who fired Lee Suyan," she said. "And neither of those things felt like power being performed. They felt like decisions, made by a person who knew what he was doing and why." She paused. I understand decisions made with clarity. I find them less frightening than things I can't read. He looked at her for a long moment. I find you difficult to read sometimes, he said. I know. Almost smile. I find that useful. He ordered for them both because she told him to, which surprised him. She seemed like someone who would want control over her own choices. But she said simply, "You know this place better than I do. Order what's good." And the trust in that small thing landed somewhere in his chest and stayed there. They ate. They talked. The conversation had the quality now of something that had found its level. Not easy, not uncomplicated, but honest in the way that two people are honest when they've decided the performance of safety is more exhausting than the risk of the real thing. He told her carefully about Jae-suk's concern. Not the specifics of Black Phoenix, not yet. And he was aware of the not yet, aware of the implications of that particular phrasing, but the shape of it. That the people around him saw a change in his operating pattern, that the change had a direction. She listened to this without interrupting. "And what do you think?" she asked when he finished. "I think Jae-suk is right about the risk," he said, "and I think I'm going to proceed anyway." She looked at him steadily. "That's not a small thing to say." "No. You barely know me." "I know the work you do when nobody's asking you to do it," he said. "I know how you stood on that street. I know what your face did when the coffee arrived at your desk, and you didn't know what to do with the gesture." He paused. "I know enough." She was quiet for a long time. The restaurant was warm around them, the kitchen sounds a low, comfortable background. "I'm scared," she said finally. Plain, no apology in it. "I know," he said. "So am I." She looked at him with an expression that did something complicated, something between disbelief and the first tentative movement of something warmer. "You're not scared of anything." "I wasn't," he said, "before last Tuesday in the rain." And it was in that moment, the specific silence that followed, the two of them across a low table in a warm restaurant in Mapogu while the rain came down outside, that Taehyun's phone buzzed. He would have ignored it. He had been ignoring his phone for the better part of 2 hours, but it buzzed 3 times in quick succession, which was the emergency signal, which he had not heard in 14 months, and the number was Jae-seok's personal line. He looked at Zuri. Something in his face must have changed because she sat up straighter immediately. "Go," she said. "It's okay." He stepped outside into the narrow, covered entryway of the restaurant, rain coming down 2 feet in front of him, phone to his ear. Jae-suk picked up on the first ring. "There's a problem." "Tell me." "The Yaoi faction." Jae-suk's voice was controlled in the specific way it got controlled when things were very bad. Flat, stripped of everything non-essential, the voice of a man transmitting information with maximum fidelity. They didn't get what they needed from Hwang, so they went a different direction. Taehyun waited. "They've been inside Phoenix Global Holdings corporate network for 6 weeks, Jae-suk said. Not the Black Phoenix side, the legitimate company side. Corporate intelligence, financial modeling, competitive analysis." A pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. Taehyun, the Southeast Asian analysis. The cold moved through him from the chest outward. "They have it," Jae-suk said. "All of it. Every page. And they've cross-referenced it with the Incheon routing architecture Hwang gave them, and they've used it to identify 3 of our distribution fronts in Manila." Another pause. "They sent a message an hour ago. They want a meeting, not a negotiation. A meeting. And they want one thing in exchange for sitting down instead of burning those fronts to the ground." Taehyun stood in the entryway with the rain 2 feet away and the warmth of the restaurant behind him, and Jae-suk's voice in his ear, and felt the specific sensation of 2 worlds colliding at a speed that made the impact inevitable. "What do they want?" he said. "They want to know," Jae-suk said carefully, "who produced the Southeast Asian analysis, by name. They want the analyst." The silence lasted 4 seconds. "They think it's an intelligence asset," Jae-suk continued. "They think someone inside Phoenix Global is running corporate counterintelligence for us on the legitimate side. They want the analyst handed over for a conversation." He paused. "Tae-hyun. They have her name from the document metadata. They already know who she is." Taehyun turned and looked through the restaurant window. Zuri was at the table, both hands around her water glass, looking down at the table with the particular stillness of someone waiting with patience rather than anxiety. Her braids fell forward slightly. The warm light of the restaurant made her skin luminous in the way rain-soaked pavement had the first night, and he stood outside in the cold and looked at her and felt something close in his chest, like a door swinging shut. She had sent that analysis to him this morning, on his instruction. Her name was in the metadata, and in the 6 weeks she had spent building it, unprompted, on her own time, for no audience and no recognition, she had inadvertently built the most detailed map of Black Phoenix's legitimate financial infrastructure that any outside organization had ever possessed. Not because she was an asset, because she was exceptional, because she saw gaps that no one else saw, and filled them, because the work itself was the only thing that had never failed to give her back what she put in. And now the Yui faction had her name. And Taehyun was standing in the rain outside a restaurant in Mapo-gu, with the full weight of 11 years of controlled, compartmentalized, carefully managed consequence coming down on the one person he had let past the gate before the gate knew to close. And Jae-seok's voice was still in his ear, waiting, because there was a decision to make, and the decision could not wait, and every option in front of him required him to be a version of himself that he was no longer entirely certain he recognized. He put the phone down, not ended the call, just lowered it from his ear and stood in the entryway with the rain 2 feet in front of him and Jae-seok's voice still audible as a small, tinny sound coming from the speaker, saying his name twice, then going quiet. 4 seconds. Maybe 5. Then he raised the phone. Don't respond to them yet. Taehyun. Don't respond. Give me 1 hour. He paused. Where are you? Tower, executive floor. Stay there. He hung up. He stood for 1 more second. Then he pushed the restaurant door open and went back inside. She looked up when he reached the table. Read his face with the speed of someone who had spent years developing peripheral awareness as a survival mechanism. The quick, involuntary assessment of a person who had learned that changes in atmosphere preceded changes in safety. What happened? She said. He sat down. He looked at her directly, which was the only way he knew how to do this. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to listen to all of it before you respond. Her hand stilled on the water glass. Okay, he told her. Not everything. Not the full architecture of Black Phoenix, not the 11 years, not the specifics of the criminal infrastructure that existed 3 layers beneath the legitimate face of Phoenix Global Holdings. But enough. He told her about the Yui faction, about Hwang Chul-soo and the Incheon roads, about the corporate network breach 6 weeks ago, about the analysis, her analysis, the 114 pages she had built on her own time, and what the Yui faction had done with it when they cross-referenced it with what Hwang had given them. He told her they had her name. He told her what they wanted. He watched her face while he talked. She did not interrupt. She did not look away. Her breathing changed. He could see it in the slight shift of her shoulders, the way her chest moved. But her expression remained controlled with the specific discipline of someone who had learned that reactions were information, and information given freely was a vulnerability. When he finished, the silence lasted long enough that the kitchen sounds behind them became audible. The clatter of a pan, someone calling an order. Normal sounds, unreasonable in the context of the table they were sitting at. You're telling me, she said slowly, that my work, my analysis, that I accidentally mapped the financial infrastructure of a criminal organization. The legitimate corporate side of it, he said. But yes, the cross-reference made it actionable for them. She looked at him. And they think I'm an intelligence asset. Yes. Working for you. Yes. I'm a data analyst, she said. I was doing it because I saw a gap. I know that. They don't. No. She set the water glass down, very carefully, with the deliberate gentleness of someone managing their hands, because managing their hands was the available option. And they want to meet with me. They want me to hand you over for a conversation. He said it flatly because flattening it was the only way to say it without the anger in his chest becoming audible. That is not going to happen. She looked at him for a long moment. What does hand over mean in this context? It means they want leverage, he said. They believe you have operational knowledge. They want to extract it. And they want to use the meeting as a message to me about what happens to people I'm connected to. The word connected sat between them with the full weight of the previous 4 days behind it. You told Jae-suk not to respond, she said. Yes. Why? Because the options available to me if I respond immediately are worse than the options available to me in an hour. He kept his voice level. I need to think. Think out loud, she said. He looked at her. She said it without aggression, without demand. The way she said everything, with the quiet directness of someone who processed information well and was offering to do it alongside him. An analyst's instinct. Give me the data and let me work with it. He exhaled once. If I hand you over, they get what they believe you have, realize you're not what they think, and the meeting becomes about something else, something worse. If I refuse the meeting outright, they move against the Manila fronts within 48 hours, which triggers a chain of events that costs the organization significantly and potentially exposes infrastructure to law enforcement on top of the UE pressure. He paused. If I meet with them myself, without you, they interpret it as confirmation that you're an asset. I'm protecting and the pressure increases. She was listening with both hands flat on the table now, perfectly still. The only option that addresses all 3 problems, he said, is the one that's not supposed to exist. She waited. I bring you to the meeting, he said, willingly, and you show them the work. She blinked. I show them. All of it, everything. The methodology, the raw models, the gap analysis. You demonstrate in the room that what you built was corporate market intelligence, not counter-operations work, not anything connected to Black Phoenix's operational structure. You show them the work is exactly what it appears to be. He looked at her. Because it is. And because the only person who can demonstrate that convincingly is the person who built it. She stared at him. You want me to sit in a room with people who think I'm… No. His voice was harder than he intended. He moderated it. I want you somewhere safe while Jae-suk and I handle this meeting. What I'm describing is one option, not the option I prefer. But it's the one that works. He didn't answer. Tae-hyun. She leaned forward slightly. Is it the one that works? He held her gaze. Potentially, yes. She sat back, looked at the table. He could see her processing it. Not the fear of it, or not only the fear of it, but the actual problem, the structural problem. The way an analyst looks at a model with variables she doesn't like but needs to account for honestly. I need to think, she said. You have time. How much? An hour, maybe less. She nodded. Okay. She picked up her water glass, put it down without drinking. Tell me about the meeting location. Who controls the space? He looked at her. You're asking tactical questions. I'm asking the questions that matter. She met his eyes. If I'm going to make a decision in an hour, I need information. Stop managing what you tell me. The authority in it was quiet, absolute. The voice of someone who had decided that the performance of smallness had cost her enough. He told her everything. They were in Jae-suk's car 40 minutes later. A different vehicle, not the Mercedes. A gray SUV that Jae-suk drove himself. Tae-hyun was in the back with Zuri. Jae-suk had said nothing when Tae-hyun arrived at the tower with her. He had looked at her, looked at Tae-hyun, and said, The meeting is at the Noryangjin site. 2 hours. Who's their representative? Tae-hyun said. Han Byung-chul. Jae-suk said the name with the flat affect reserved for people he considered genuinely dangerous. He came up himself. Han Byung-chul was the Yoi faction's operational director. Not the top, but close enough that sending him meant this was not a preliminary conversation. This was a statement of intent. In the back of the SUV, Tae-hyun sat with 3 inches of seat between himself and Zuri and felt the 3 inches as a specific physical fact. She was looking out the window at the Han River as they crossed the bridge, her reflection in the glass overlaid on the dark water below. Her hands were in her lap. Still. You don't have to come, he said quietly. I know. Jae-suk and I can… I know. She turned from the window, looked at him. I've been making myself small in rooms for 30 years so that other people would feel comfortable. I'm not doing it tonight. A pause. The almost smile, except it wasn't almost anymore. Besides, it's my work. I know it better than anyone in that room will. He looked at her in the low light of the moving car and felt something that had no clean name settle in his chest. Something between pride and terror, and the specific ache of a person who has found something they did not know they were looking for and now has to protect it in a world that does not accommodate that kind of finding. "Stay behind me when we go in," he said. "Don't speak first. Don't respond to anything directed at you until I signal." "What's the signal?" "I'll say your name." She nodded. "Once, professional." The Noryangjin site was a disused commercial property near the fish market district. 3 stories, ground floor stripped of its original fittings, the kind of space that existed in the gaps between active development and active demolition. Jae-seok pulled in through the rear entrance at 11:40 p.m. 2 Black Phoenix security personnel were already positioned outside, which meant Jae-seok had made calls on the way that he hadn't narrated, because Jae-seok operated the way he always operated, several moves ahead, visible only in retrospect. Inside, the ground floor was lit by 4 standing work lights that cast hard-edged shadows and made everything beyond their immediate radius completely dark. In the center of the space, 4 men stood around a folding table. Han Byung-chul was the one who turned first. He was in his early 50s, compact, flat-faced, with the particular stillness of a man who had been in enough rooms like this one to have stopped being affected by the atmosphere they produced. His eyes moved to Tae-hyun, then to Jae-seok, then to Zuri, and they stayed on Zuri for 2 seconds longer than necessary. "Chairman Kang," he said, Korean formal register, the courtesy of an opening that was not courtesy at all. "I didn't expect you to bring her." "Then we're already past your expectations," Tae-hyun said. "Good." Han gestured to the table. "Sit." "I'll stand." A beat. Han's expression didn't change. "As you like." He looked at Zuri again. "Miss Bennett, your Korean is better than your personnel file indicates." "My personnel file doesn't mention my Korean," she said. Her voice was even. Tae-hyun clocked the deliberate correction. She had read the file or guessed its contents and chose to establish immediately that she was not going to be managed by assumptions. Han almost smiled. "You prepared her," he said to Tae-hyun. "She prepared herself," Tae-hyun said. Han moved around the table, not threateningly, but with the ease of a man who owned whatever room he was in by default. He stopped on the near side, closer to Zuri than Tae-hyun preferred, and Tae-hyun felt his weight shift forward half an inch without deciding to. "The analysis," Han said. He produced a tablet from his jacket and set it on the table face up. The screen showed page 1 of Zuri's 114-page document. "You built this in 6 weeks." "Yes," she said. "For what purpose?" "Because I identified a gap in the existing market intelligence for the Southeast Asian division, and I wanted to fill it." Unprompted. "Yes." Han looked at the tablet, at her. "Miss Bennett, I've been in this business for 28 years. I've seen corporate cover stories for intelligence assets. I've read fabricated employment histories. I know what it looks like when someone is placed inside an organization." He paused. "This analysis is too good. The structural mapping in the supply chain section alone reflects an understanding of operational logistics that goes beyond standard market intelligence." He tapped the tablet. "This reads like the work of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for." "No," she said. "It reads like the work of someone who's very good at her job." The silence that followed was the specific kind that tests temperature. "Page 47, she said. She walked to the table. Tae-hyun's hand moved involuntarily, and he stopped it. She picked up the tablet. "The supply chain vulnerability I identified in the Manila corridor, you interpreted that as operational mapping. It's not. It's a standard logistics gap created by inconsistent customs documentation cycles between 3 ports." She turned the tablet toward Han and pointed. "The data source is publicly available from the Manila Port Authority's quarterly release. I cross-referenced it with satellite shipping manifests from a commercial tracking service and regional economic indicators from the ASEAN Development Report." She looked at Han directly. "I can show you every source document, every one, because I kept them all, because that's how I work, and because the methodology is replicable by anyone with the same public data access. She set the tablet down. It's not intelligence work, it's analysis, good analysis. And the difference is that intelligence work requires sources I don't have and don't want. The room was very quiet. Han looked at the tablet, at her. His expression had shifted, not dramatically, not into anything readable as concession, but the specific micro-shift of a man recalibrating. He looked at Tae-hyun. You read this work before tonight? Yes. And you believed it was standard corporate analysis? I believed it was exceptional corporate analysis, Tae-hyun said. That is not the same as embedded intelligence. Han was quiet for a moment. One of the men behind him said something in a low voice. Han raised one hand slightly and the voice stopped. Show me the source documents, Han said to Zuri. I don't have them here, she said. They're on my work system. Then we wait while you pull them. Tae-hyun said, No. Han looked at him. She'll send them to a designated address tomorrow morning, Tae-hyun said. From her own device, her own system, time-stamped and unaltered. You can verify the metadata. He looked at Han steadily. But she does it tomorrow morning, from outside this building, after she's left here tonight without any further conversation with your people. Han studied him. The study was long and precise and had the quality of a man reading not what was being said, but what was underneath it. The specific weight of what Tae-hyun was willing to do if the answer was wrong. You brought her here yourself, Han said finally. That surprised me. She insisted, Tae-hyun said. Han looked at Zuri. Something in his expression moved, not warmth, not exactly, but the particular regard of a man who has revised an assessment and is honest enough with himself to acknowledge the revision. Most people, he said to her, in your position would not have come. Most people in my position, she said, have spent their whole lives not coming. It hasn't served them particularly well. Another silence. Then Han picked up the tablet, looked at it one more time, set it down. The manila fronts stay as they are, he said to Tae-hyun, until we've reviewed the source documents. He paused. If the verification holds, we sit down properly. Renegotiate the terms of our current arrangement. Another pause. Not because I'm persuaded of everything tonight, because I'm persuaded enough to wait. That's acceptable, Tae-hyun said. The Incheon matter. Hwang Chul-soo no longer works for my organization, Tae-hyun said. The roots have been restructured. That chapter is closed. Han nodded once, looked at the two of them, at Tae-hyun, at Zuri, at the 3 inches of space between them that was not actually 3 inches of space at all, in any sense that mattered. Interesting situation you've built for yourself, Chairman, he said, not unkindly, almost analytically. I'm aware, Tae-hyun said. They left the Noryangjin site at 12:20 a.m. In the car on the way back, Jae-seok drove and said nothing for the first 8 minutes, which was long even for Jae-seok. Then, that went better than it should have. Yes, Tae-hyun said. She's the reason it went better than it should have. A pause. Yes. Jae-seok nodded. One deliberate nod, looking at the road. Okay, he said. That was all. But from Jae-seok, okay covered a considerable amount of ground. In the back seat, Zuri sat with her head tipped back against the headrest and her eyes closed. She wasn't asleep. Her breathing was too controlled for sleep, the careful, deliberate rhythm of someone running a debrief inside their own head, processing in the systematic way she processed everything. After a few minutes, she said, without opening her eyes, the source documents. I'll pull them at 7 a.m. You don't have to, Tae-hyun. She opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling of the car. I built the analysis. I'll finish it. A pause. That's how I work. He looked at her profile in the moving dark, the clean angle of her jaw, the braids loose against the headrest, the particular stillness of someone who had walked into a room full of dangerous men and demonstrated without theatrics exactly who she was. His phone buzzed, Jae-seok's name on the screen. He frowned. Jae-seok was 6 feet away. He picked up. Don't react, Jae-seok said. His voice had changed, stripped down, flat, the emergency register. Look at the side mirror, blue sedan. It's been behind us since Noryangjin. Tae-hyun looked, casual movement, head turning slightly as though looking out the window. Blue sedan, 4 car lengths back. It had been there since the bridge. Han's people? he said quietly. No. Plates are different. This isn't Yoi. A pause. I've seen this car twice this week, outside the tower. I didn't flag it because I wasn't sure. The cold moved through him again. Different cold this time. The specific cold of a threat that hadn't declared itself yet, which was always worse than the ones that had. Who else knew about tonight? He said. No one outside Black Phoenix. Black Phoenix is 40 people. I know. Jae-suk's voice was very controlled. I'm going to change the route. If it follows, we have a problem. If it follows, Taehyun said, take us somewhere we control. He put the phone down, looked straight ahead. Beside him, Zuri had gone still in a different way than before. The stillness of someone who had caught the texture of the conversation and was processing what it meant without being told. Is it over? She said quietly. He looked at her. Her eyes were on him, steady, dark, the same eyes from the street in the rain. Not afraid. Alert. He thought about what Jae-seok had said. 40 people in Black Phoenix. 1 week since the Hwang situation. 1 week since Zuri's name had entered the operational orbit of his two worlds colliding. He thought about Han Byung-chul's voice. Interesting situation you've built for yourself. The blue sedan was still there when Jae-seok took the first route change, an unnecessary left at the Yeouido junction that no driver going north would take. It followed. Jae-seok said nothing in the front seat. His hands on the wheel were completely relaxed, which meant he was operating at maximum alertness, because that was how Jae-seok's body worked. It got quieter as the stakes climbed. Taehyun put his hand over Zuri's on the seat between them. Not dramatically, not with any of the weight of everything that had happened in the past 4 days. Just his hand over hers. Warm, steady, present. She turned her hand over beneath his. The blue sedan closed the distance by 1 car length. And from the front seat, Jae-seok said, in the voice he used when there was no more time for any other kind of conversation, hold on. Jae-seok drove the way he did everything, without waste. The SUV accelerated through the Yeouido junction at a speed that pushed Zuri into the seat back, and Taehyun's hand tightened over hers without thinking about it, and the blue sedan behind them did the same thing the blue sedan had been doing for the past 6 minutes. It followed. No hesitation. No attempt at subtlety anymore. The distance had closed to 2 car lengths and was closing further. Who has a tail car? Taehyun said. Nobody sends one tail car, Jae-seok said from the front. Check the parallel street. Taehyun looked left through the window, a side street running alongside them at speed. And there, keeping pace, a second vehicle. Black. No plates visible at this angle. He processed this in approximately 2 seconds. It's not Yui. No, Jae-seok said. Yui doesn't use 2 cars on a single target. This is someone who wanted us to see the blue sedan. Bait. Bait, Jae-seok confirmed. So we'd focus on it while the black one got into position. Zuri's hand was still turned under his. Her fingers had tightened once, briefly, when the SUV accelerated and then gone still again. He could feel her pulse in the heel of her palm, faster than normal, controlled anyway, the body running hot while the mind ran cold. He recognized it. He ran the same way himself. Where are we going? She said. Quiet. Not panicked. Somewhere we control, Jae-seok said. 3 minutes. He took a right that put them onto the elevated expressway, and for 90 seconds they had open road, and the blue sedan fell back 2 car lengths because its driver hadn't anticipated the turn. The black car on the parallel street disappeared, either lost or repositioning. Taehyun pulled out his phone and called the head of Black Phoenix's security detail with the specific coded language that meant immediate deployment rather than standby. He gave a location, a warehouse facility in Yeongdeungpo that Black Phoenix had controlled for 7 years, with a security infrastructure that was considerably more substantial than its industrial exterior suggested. Then he put the phone away and turned to Zuri. When we get out of the car, he said, you stay between me and Jae-seok. You don't stop moving until we're inside. She nodded. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were on him. I need you to tell me something, he said. What? Are you all right? A pause. Ask me in an hour, she said. Right now I'm functional. It was, he thought, the most honest answer anyone had ever given him to that question. The warehouse was 7 minutes away. The blue sedan stayed on them for 5 of those minutes and then pulled off abruptly at an intersection, which was worse than if it had stayed, because it meant they had accomplished whatever objective required proximity. The black car didn't reappear. Chae-seok pulled into the warehouse through the rear loading bay, and the doors closed behind them before the SUV engine had finished ticking down. Inside, 6 black Phoenix security personnel, 2 of whom Tae-hyun had known for nearly a decade. Overhead fluorescence, concrete floor, the particular cold of a large enclosed space in October. 3 vehicles already staged near the far wall. Jae-seok was out of the SUV before it fully stopped, speaking to the senior security man in the rapid clipped language of an operational briefing. Tae-hyun got out, came around to Zuri's side. She was already out, standing with her back to the SUV, reading the space, exits, personnel, sightlines. He watched her do it and felt something complicated move through him. "Come with me," he said. There was a secondary office along the warehouse's north wall, a room with 4 walls and a door that closed, which was sufficient. He brought her there. The room had a desk, 2 chairs, a space heater that had probably not been used this calendar year. He turned the heater on. She sat in one of the chairs without being asked and put her elbows on her knees and looked at the floor for a moment. He sat in the other chair. Not behind the desk. Beside her, both of them facing the same direction, which was a decision he made without consciously making it. "The person who sent that car," she said, still looking at the floor. "It's not Yaoi." "No." "So there's someone else." "There's someone else," he confirmed. "Someone who knew about the Noryoung-jin meeting, which means someone inside Black Phoenix." She looked up at that, looked at him directly. How many people knew? Jae-seok coordinated the site. He would have used 2, maybe 3 trusted people to prepare the location. He paused. "And I told you, in the restaurant. You don't think I—" "No." Flat. No qualifier attached to it. "I don't." She held his gaze, searched it. "You're very certain for someone who met me 6 days ago." "I'm certain," he said, "because I know how to read people. It's kept me alive for 11 years. He paused. "And because I read you specifically. Every choice you've made in the last 6 days has been consistent with who you are, not with who a planted intelligence asset would need to be." She exhaled, long, slow, the first time all night that her breath had come out without being managed. "Someone in your own organization," she said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "What do you do with that?" "I find out who," he said. "Then I deal with it." She looked at the heater. It was beginning to warm the air in small, incremental degrees. "And the Yaoi situation, the documents I'm supposed to send tomorrow." "We send them," he said. "Nothing about that changes. Han Byung-chul is not the problem tonight. 2 problems at once." "It's rarely fewer than that," he said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not quite. Close enough that he registered it as something his chest wanted to hold on to. They sat in the warehouse office for 22 minutes while Jae-seok ran the external assessment. At 12:58 a.m., Jae-seok knocked and came in and stood in the doorway with the expression of a man who had found something he had not entirely wanted to find. "Kim Dong-woo," he said. Tae-hyun was very still. Kim Dong-woo was Black Phoenix's logistics coordinator. He had been with the organization for 6 years. He was 31 years old, organized, methodical, trusted with routing information and site coordination, which meant he had known about Noryoung-jin because Jae-seok had needed him to prepare the site access. "He made a call 40 minutes before we arrived," Jae-seok said. "We pulled the log." He paused. "The number traces to a holding company registered in Busan." "Cho," Tae-hyun said. "The company has 3 degrees of separation from Cho's operation. But yes." Jae-seok's jaw was tight. Cho agreed to the truce extension 4 days ago, while simultaneously running a separate play. He exhaled through his nose. "The tail cars tonight weren't meant to follow us. They were meant to establish our location so Cho could move against the Yongdungpo Tower while we were away from it." Tae-hyun processed this in silence. "The tower," he said. "We got there in time. Dong-hyun had a full security team in place. Cho's people made 1 pass and pulled off when they saw the response." Chae-seok paused. "Nobody hurt. Nothing taken. But they were looking for something specific. They went for the executive floor data systems. The Manila analysis, Tae-hyun said. We think so. Cho wants what Yui has. Jae-seok looked at Zuri briefly, then back at Tae-hyun. The truce extension was a delay tactic. He was waiting for tonight, waiting until you were away from the building with a reason to be distracted. The thing in Tae-hyun's chest was cold and very clear. Cho had used the Noryang-jin meeting, used the Yaoi pressure, used everything that had drawn Tae-hyun out of the tower at midnight as cover for an operation against the company's data infrastructure. And the mechanism that had made all of it possible was Kim Dong-woo, sitting inside Black Phoenix for 6 years, trusted with logistics, waiting for the right moment to be useful to someone else. He stood up. Where's Dong-woo now? He said. We brought him in when we pulled the call log, Jae-seok said. He's here. Tae-hyun looked at Zuri. She was watching him with the steady, unblinking attention of someone who was reading not just what was being said, but the full weight of what it meant to say it. I need to handle something, he said. I know, she said. You'll stay here. Stay. I know that too. She looked at him. Tae-hyun. She said his name the way she had in the restaurant, without title, without performance. Do what you need to do. He held her gaze for one moment. Then he left. The conversation with Kim Dong-woo lasted 11 minutes and took place in a room at the far end of the warehouse that had no chairs in it, by design. Tae-hyun stood opposite a man he had trusted for 6 years and listened to him explain, in the broken and deflated language of someone who has stopped pretending, how Cho's people had approached him 8 months ago with an offer that had seemed manageable at the time. A debt. Dong-woo had a debt. The private kind, not organizational. The kind a 31-year-old man accrues by making decisions he doesn't bring to his employer's attention. Cho's people had bought the debt and offered a simple arrangement, information when asked for it. Dong-woo had provided 4 pieces of information over 8 months. The last one was tonight. He didn't cry. He didn't make arguments. He sat with the particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something for 8 months and has finally put it down and is too depleted to feel anything about the putting down, except relief. Tae-hyun listened to all of it. Then he said, Who else? No one, Dong-woo said. I swear to you, just me. Tae-hyun looked at him for a long moment, at the face of a man he had known for 6 years, at the specific geography of someone whose choices had collapsed the space between who they were and who they had become until there was no room left to stand in. You're done, Tae-hyun said, with Black Phoenix, with Phoenix Global, with Busan and everything connected to Cho. You're done with all of it. He paused. And you will tell me right now everything you told them, every piece of information, every date, every contact. Dong-woo told him. All of it. It took 40 minutes. At 2 a.m., Tae-hyun came back to the small office where Zuri was waiting. She was sitting in the same chair but had turned it slightly toward the heater, which had finally made the room approaching warm. She had her jacket pulled around her shoulders and was looking at nothing in particular. Not anxious, not restless, just present in the particular way she was present in spaces, as though she had made peace with wherever she was while it was still in question. She looked up when he came in. He sat down in the other chair. He was tired in a way that went past the physical, the specific depletion of someone who has spent the last 3 hours operating at the outer edge of what they control and has now come back inside that edge with the effort visible in the set of their shoulders. It's handled, he said. She looked at him. All of it? The immediate threat. The rest takes time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at the floor. Cho will know the operation tonight failed. He'll pull back and recalculate. That buys us weeks, maybe a month. He paused. Enough time to address it properly. She was quiet for a moment. And Yaoi? Yui is a negotiation now, not a confrontation. Han wants the documents. We send them. The arrangement shifts. He looked up. It's not clean. None of this is clean. But it's stable. She nodded slowly. Kim Dong-woo. Gone. He said it without elaboration. She didn't ask for any. The heater clicked and hummed between them. Outside the office wall, the warehouse had gone quieter. The security personnel still present, but no longer at operational pitch. the particular sound of a facility coming down from high alert to maintenance watch. I need to tell you something, Taehyun said. She waited. What happened tonight, what almost happened tonight, is not an anomaly in my world. He said it carefully, with the precision of someone who has been waiting to say something true and is making sure to say it completely. It is the world. People I trust make choices I don't see coming. People I've controlled for years find angles I didn't anticipate. And the people who are close to me, he stopped, started again. The people who are close to me become visible to everyone who wants to find a way to get at me. She was still. You became visible, he said. Tonight, not because you did anything wrong, because you were near me, and that is enough. She held his gaze. I know. I can't change what my world is, he said. I can change how I operate in it, the precautions, the protocols, the way I manage exposure. He paused. But I can't make it safe in the way a different life would be safe. And I won't lie to you about that by leaving it unsaid. The silence between them was long, not empty, inhabited the way silences are when two people are both present in them. Why are you telling me this? She said. Right now. Because you walked into that building tonight without having the full picture, he said. And I don't want to be someone who keeps you in a partial picture for my own reasons. She looked at him. Something in her face moved through several expressions in quick succession, too fast, too complex to inventory, and then settled into something quieter and more final. I grew up, she said slowly, in a house where the truth was always managed, where what was said in front of me was calibrated for what the adults decided I needed to know. She paused. I learned to read around the edges of things because I never got the full picture until it was too late for it to matter. She looked at the heater. I've spent my adult life very tired of partial pictures. He said nothing. So thank you, she said, for this one. The drive back across Seoul happened at 3 a.m. on near-empty streets, the city showing its bones in the way cities only do in the hours before the first buses run. All infrastructure and no performance, the skeleton of the thing without its daily flesh. Chae-seok drove. Tae-hyun sat in the back with Zuri, and this time there were no 3 inches between them. She sat with her shoulder against his arm and her head tipped slightly toward him. Not asleep, not quite, her breathing slower than it had been all night. He did not move. He sat with his back straight and her warmth along his left side and looked out the window at the passing empty streets of Seoul and felt, underneath the exhaustion and the residue of the night's controlled emergencies, something that had no tactical value whatsoever and that he had no intention of managing away. Jae-seok's eyes appeared once in the rear-view mirror, took in the back seat, returned to the road. He said nothing. His expression was the expression of a man revising a position he had held for reasons he still believed were valid, while acknowledging that the evidence had shifted. At 3:20 a.m., Tae-hyun sent the source document package from Zuri's work system. She pulled it herself, sitting in the back of the SUV with her laptop, organized and transmitted with the methodical efficiency of someone for whom this represented the completion of a task, not a surrender. She sent it to the encrypted address Han Byung-chul had provided and CC'd a verification hash to Jae-seok's secure account, and then she closed the laptop and looked out the window. It's done, she said. Yes, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I want to go home. I'll have someone drive you. I want to go by myself. She looked at him. Not because of... I just need to walk into my apartment alone. Is that... Of course, he said. She nodded, looked back out the window. Then, quietly, I'm coming to work tomorrow. He looked at her profile. You don't have to. I know. A pause. But I have a Southeast Asian analysis that 3 people in Manila apparently find very compelling, and I want to finish it properly. The almost smile returned from wherever it had been during the last 4 hours. And I want to do it at my own desk. He let himself feel what that sentence produced in his chest. Just for a moment. Just the clean, uncomplicated fact of it. All right, he said. The weeks that followed were not simple. Nothing that followed was simple, which was a thing Tae-hyun had understood long enough ago, that he no longer expected otherwise. The The Cho situation required 3 weeks of careful operational pressure. Not violence, not confrontation, but the slower and more durable work of making Cho's position untenable from enough directions simultaneously that the cost of continuing to move against Black Phoenix exceeded the benefit. It worked. The way things that are built on real leverage work. Not dramatically, not with a moment of obvious capitulation, but through Cho going quiet and then going quiet more and eventually directing his attention toward problems that did not involve Yongdong-po. Han Byung-chul verified the source documents within 48 hours of receiving them. He sent a single line through the encrypted channel. The documents are clean. Jae-suk had read it twice before forwarding it to Tae-hyun without comment. The renegotiation of the Yoi arrangement took 4 more meetings over 3 weeks and produced terms that were better for Black Phoenix than what had existed before. Not because the crisis had been eliminated, but because Han Byung-chul was the kind of operational man who respected capability demonstrated under pressure, and Zuri Bennett walking into Noryangjin at midnight with her source documentation mentally organized had registered as precisely that. Tae-hyun never told her this. He told Jae-seok, who received it with the expression of a man updating a file he had been keeping for a long time. "She changed the outcome," Jae-seok said. "Yes," Tae-hyun said. "Not because you brought her in," Jae-seok said, "because of who she is." "Yes." Jae-seok was quiet for a moment, then, "I was wrong about the timeline." "You were right about the risk," Tae-hyun said. "The risk exists. It will always exist." "Yes," Jae-seok said. "But so does she." He paused. "That's a different equation than I was running." The Corporate Intelligence Department realigned itself over those weeks in the way departments realign after something is shifted in the power structure, slowly, with some resistance, and then with the pragmatic acceptance of a collective that has understood which way the permanent wind is blowing. The attribution protocols Tae-hyun had mandated held. Choi Ara came back from her suspension, and on her 3rd day back, stopped by Zuri's desk and said something brief that Zuri later relayed to Tae-hyun in the same flat reporting tone she used for everything. She said she was sorry, not the practiced kind, the kind that costs something. "Chi." "What did you say?" he asked. I said okay. A pause. Because it was. Park Jina returned from suspension and did her own work without comment, which was all that had been asked of her. The department was quieter than it had been, which the department head attributed to a new professional focus, and Tae-hyun attributed to the fact that a certain category of ambient cruelty had lost its social safety and gone underground, which was not the same as being gone, but was a different problem, one that time and continued visibility would address more effectively than another meeting. Zuri finished the Southeast Asian analysis in the 3rd week of November. It was 131 pages by the time she considered it complete, and she sent it to Tae-hyun at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday with a subject line that said, "Final." The actual final one. He read all of it that night. The following Monday, she was promoted to Senior Strategic Analyst, which was a designation that hadn't existed in the Corporate Intelligence Department before Song created the title at Tae-hyun's instruction, because the existing hierarchy didn't have a place for what she actually was. She received the notification by email from HR at 9 a.m. and appeared at his office door at 9:14 with the expression of someone who has decided to have a direct conversation rather than a managed one. "You created a title," she said. "The existing structure didn't fit," he said. "You can't just—" "I run the company," he said. "I can restructure the title architecture of any department at any time." He looked at her. "The compensation reflects the seniority. The responsibilities reflect what you're already doing. The title reflects what you actually are." She stood in the doorway looking at him. Her hair was different again. She'd started changing things by increments over the past weeks. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow, confident way of someone who is becoming more comfortable occupying her own surface. Today she wore deep green, which suited her in a way the gray cardigans never had, and the oversized glasses were gone. She'd gotten new ones, smaller frames. And the difference was that her face was fully visible now, rather than partially obscured. "The department will talk," she said. "The department will adjust," he said, "but they adjust to everything else." She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face settled. Not into surrender, not into simple acceptance, but into the particular expression of someone who has decided to believe something that their history told them not to believe and is doing it anyway, with full knowledge of the choice they're making. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She went back to work. On a Friday in early December, 3 days before the company's annual executive conference, Tae-hyun stood at the window of his office at 7 p.m. and called his mother. He did this periodically, not on schedule, not with the regularity of obligation, but when something had shifted in the composition of his life and he wanted his parents to know about the shift before they heard about it from somewhere else, which was a professional hazard in his world. His mother listened to what he said. She was a precise woman, his mother, small and still, and observant in the way that people are when they have spent decades paying attention to more than the surface of things. She had known about Black Phoenix since Tae-hyun was 25, and had adjusted to the knowledge with the particular pragmatism of a woman who loved her son and understood that love without clear sight was only sentiment. She listened, then she said, "Bring her to dinner, Sunday." "I want to ask her first," he said. "So ask her," his mother said, "and then bring her Sunday." He called his father after. His father said, "Is she good to you?" "Yes," Tae-hyun said. "Then Sunday," his father said. "Your mother is already planning." He smiled. It was a small smile, and there was no one in the room to see it, and it was, for that reason, the most genuine smile he could remember producing in a considerable amount of time. He asked Zuri on Saturday afternoon, over coffee in the Mapogu restaurant that had become, without either of them declaring it, their place. The worn low tables, the chalkboard menu, the kitchen that did 3 things well. He asked her the way he asked her most things, directly, without softening the approach, but with the particular care that had become the register he used specifically with her. She was quiet for a moment, held her coffee cup in both hands. "Your parents know what you do," she said. "All of it." "Yes. And they want to meet me anyway." "My mother has already planned the menu," he said. "So the wanting is well established." She looked at her coffee. "I don't have a script for this," she said. "I've never met anyone's family. I don't know how to—" "You don't need a script," he said. "Just be exactly who you are." She looked at him. "That's either very simple advice or very complicated advice." "Which one depends on the day," he said. "For you, I think it's simple." She considered this. Then, okay, Sunday. Sunday was warm food and a small apartment in Mapo-gu that Taehyun's parents had lived in for 22 years, and that showed every year of habitation in the comfortable, unself-conscious way of a home that was not performing anything. His mother shook Zuri's hand and then, before the handshake had fully released, said, "You're hungry. Sit down." His father asked her about her work with the genuine curiosity of a retired engineer who found structural problem-solving inherently interesting regardless of the domain. And Zuri explained the Southeast Asian gap analysis over dinner with the same precise, unself-conscious fluency she used everywhere. And his father asked 3 follow-up questions that were more sophisticated than most questions Tae-hyun got from his executive team. At the end of dinner, his mother walked her to the kitchen under the pretext of tea, and the conversation that occurred there was not reported to Tae-hyun in full. What Zuri said afterward in the car, when he asked, was, "She told me that he was very alone for a long time, and she was glad he wasn't anymore." He looked at the road. "What did you say?" he said. "I said I understood that feeling," she said, "and that I thought we were even." He drove for a block without speaking. "Are you all right?" she said. "Yes," he said. And it was true, and it was simple, and it was the first time in a very long time that the answer had been both things simultaneously. The annual executive conference was held on the 2nd Thursday of December, in the main atrium of Phoenix Tower. 430 employees assembled for the year-end address, with the particular formality of a company event that everyone attends and most people experience as peripheral to their actual work. Tae-hyun stood at the front and gave the address he gave every year. Results, direction, acknowledgement of the organization's collective effort. And then he did something he had not done in the 11 years he had run this company. He stopped at the end of the prepared remarks. He looked at the room. He said one name. Zuri Bennett. She was in the 4th row, in the green she'd started wearing, with the new glasses, her braids pulled back. She looked up when he said her name with the expression of someone who had not been warned. He told them, the 430 people, the executives, the department heads, the junior analysts and logistics staff and administrative team, what she had done. Not the Noryang Jin version, not the Black Phoenix version, but the complete, accurate corporate version. 6 weeks of independent analysis that had identified structural vulnerabilities missed by the official assessment team had redirected the company's Southeast Asian strategy and had directly contributed to protecting infrastructure worth hundreds of millions of won. He said her name 3 times in that address. He said her work had made Phoenix Global Holdings stronger and smarter than it would have been without her. The room stood up. Not for him. For her. She sat in the 4th row for 2 full seconds before she stood. Not because she was reluctant, but because it took 2 seconds for her body to process that this was real and not a version of something she had rehearsed in a borrowed wig on a rainy Tuesday night for a man who never showed up. Then she stood, and her chin was level, and her eyes were bright with something that she was not going to let become tears in front of 400 people, and she was completely, entirely, undeniably visible. 3 weeks later, she called her foster mother. The call lasted 8 minutes, which was longer than most of their calls. She did not demand apology or accounting. She did not perform reconciliation. She said the true things, that she was well, that she was working, that she was in a relationship with someone who saw her clearly, that she was not unhappy. And the saying of the true things was itself the completion of something that had needed completing, the closing of a loop that could not be closed by anger or by forgiveness, but only by the simple act of being able to report honestly on the state of a life that had arrived somewhere worth reporting on. Her foster mother said, "I'm glad." Zuri said, "Me too." She ended the call and sat for a moment in the quiet of her apartment. The same apartment she had lived in for 2 years, small and organized and without photographs, except that now there was one photograph on the shelf above the desk. The 2 of them, taken without ceremony in the Mapogu restaurant by a server who had offered and been surprised when they said yes. She looked at it for a moment. Then she went back to work. On a Wednesday evening in late December, they went back to the street in Mapogu, not because they had planned it. They had been walking after dinner, and the route had taken them there. The same residential street, narrower than he remembered, or perhaps exactly as narrow as he had always known, with the same street lamps and the same tangle of power lines overhead, and the same geography of ordinary soul evening that had been present 6 weeks ago when a car hit a pothole and a woman stood in the rain and looked at a man like he was a person. The pothole was gone. Someone had filled it. Smooth asphalt, indistinguishable from the surrounding pavement, as though it had never been there at all. He looked at it for a moment, then looked at her. "I still owe you a blouse," he said. She slipped her hand into his, her fingers between his fingers, warm and without hesitation. "You replaced something more valuable," she said. He looked at her, at the street, at the empty space where the pothole had been, the smooth, unremarkable surface of a repair so complete it left no evidence of what it had corrected. "What did I replace?" he said. She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything, not reaching for the answer that sounded correct, but waiting for the one that was. The assumption, she said finally, that being seen was something that happened to other people. He held her hand and she held his, and above them soul hummed in the specific key of a winter city that has no interest in anyone's personal reckoning but goes on regardless, indifferent, and continuous, the way cities do. The street was empty. The lamps were orange warm. Somewhere behind them, 2 blocks back, the Mapogu restaurant was still producing its 3 things exceptionally well, and somewhere 40 floors above the Han River, an office sat empty for the first time in a long time at a decent hour. She was not invisible anymore. She had not become visible because he had seen her, though that was where it started. She had become visible because she had stopped actively working against her own appearance in the world, stopped borrowing other people's faces, stopped accepting the diminishment of her own work as a fair tax on the privilege of being tolerated, stopped standing in the rain saying it's fine, when nothing about it was fine. He had been the question. She had been the answer she gave herself. They walked into the winter night without looking back at the smooth, new pavement where the pothole had been, because the past was accounted for, and the present was enough, and the future was not a thing either of them had ever been in the habit of trusting too completely. But they walked into it anyway. Together. That was sufficient. That was, in the end, everything.